My name is Lily Zhang. I'm the Director of Advising, Compliance, IT, and Operations for ISS. I'm here today with my colleague, Irene Anthony. Irene, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Again, my name is Irene Anthony, and I'm an international student and scholar advisor. I work predominantly with J1 exchange visitors.
Yeah, we also have some other ISS staff, Yu Hong He and Mike Kelty, to support us. So we thank for their help. With that, we're going to dive into today's presentation. So all of you are here today because you are interested to know what is on-campus employment. On-campus employment, it is a type of employment that you can take advantage as international student, either as F1 or J1 student. To qualify as Penn on-campus employment, it has to have certain key elements. One, the payment has to come from Penn. So when you receive paycheck, it's going to show Penn as the employer. Also, the employment itself needs to happen on Penn's premises. That means it's on Penn's property. It also have to be limited to 20 hours a week where school is in session. Also, whatever you do, the employment itself going to benefit Penn. So if you have on-campus employment and it meets all the 4 elements that we lay out here, then you're safe as F1 students to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. If you're unsure, always discuss with your ISS advisor to see if whether or not that activity itself can be categorized as on-campus employment.
Okay, so I will take this next slide. So F1 students and J1 students, those are the 2 different visa classifications for students on this campus. So as an F1 student, as Lily said, you can work up to a maximum of 20 hours on campus while school is in session. And a caveat to that is that you have to be maintaining a full course load, full-time study status in your F1 status. J1 students are a little different. Prior to undertaking any on-campus employment, make sure you reach out to your IPEN record. There is a request for on-campus employment authorization in a form that would need to be completed by both you and the prospective Penn campus employer, and make sure that gets done and submitted prior to undertaking any employment. And just, to back up what the previous slide said, keep in mind, even if you have a fellowship and you're receiving a stipend or tuition remission or tuition benefit or room and board, that's still considered a benefit and payment of sorts. Although maybe not monetarily speaking, you're not receiving a paycheck for it, but you are being employed per se. So just make sure if you are in a fellowship, an assistantship, that you are submitting that request as a J1 student prior to undertaking any employment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good categorize of on-campus employment based on visa type. Now, we wanted to give you some real case scenario so that it can be a little bit easier for you to relate. So we're going to ask you a question to say, for a student who works as a TA for a professor who teaches at Wharton, the professor is planning to teach a course of to teach a similar course at Columbia University during summer, and ask the students if he can be available and continue working for him during the summer. He would like the students to serve as a TA for the course at Columbia. Now, based on the information we just talked about, is this opportunity allowed under on-campus employment for F1 or J1 students?
I would say no, Lily, because what you said was that it had to be on campus at Penn. It had to be from Penn payroll. So if the person's at Columbia, they would be getting money from Columbia. So my guess is that it's going to say no. So let's see what the answer is.
Yep. So no, students should check with ISS to see if they can request special permission or need to apply for additional work authorization, such as curriculum practical training. So as Irene has explained, for this particular new activity, although it's the same professor, but the teaching location has changed from Wharton at Penn to Columbia. So it's no longer on Penn's premises. So the on-campus employment condition is violated.
Okay, so these are just some examples of what constitutes on-campus employment. Like I mentioned earlier, teaching assistant, research assistant, graduate assistant positions, fellowships, if you're a Ben Franklin Fellow, a lot of postdoc student, doctoral students, doctoral students, not postdocs, have their fellowships that cover their tuition. So that would all qualify as on-campus employment. Other examples of what on-campus employment would be: Penn Libraries, the Rec Center, Williams Cafe, the Daily Pennsylvanian. These are all examples of what constitutes on-campus employment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. On the other hand, there's some entity, it really look like it may be on-campus employment, but they are not. So here we give you some examples. For instance, Red and Blue Call Center. Although they have red and blue in it, but it is a third-party entity. It is not directly part of Penn. So it's not on-campus employment. The Vista Institute, it's very close. It's close to the Houston Hall, but it's not part of Penn. Similar thing as CHOP. You can see CHOP buildings, it's adjunct to Penn's campuses, but it's not part of Penn. Unique advantage, this is an agency working for Penn, but they run their own payroll and it's not part of Penn. Monell, Chemical Heritage Foundation, and some other activities or entities that it is not directly part of Penn's premises, then you should check with your ISS advisor before you start working for them.
Lily, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah. So in some very special occasions, some on-campus employment, they could be authorized at off-campus location. However, those special authorization is not automatic. Normally, it already goes through the vetting process that ISS have collected all the necessary information. We listed some possible options there. For instance, the NADA Center, the GSE student Pendel, that particular program. Those are the examples of, although they may place students at an off-campus location, but the program itself, it's Penn-run program. It is also through Penn's payroll and for Penn's benefit. In such situation, we have to give a special written permission to allow those worksite to be specified on the on-campus employment at off-campus location work authorization. So if you don't have that in written format from ISS, any off-campus location is a big no-no. You cannot make those determinations for yourself. It has to go through ISS approval process.
Okay, so as far as off-campus work, there's again a little bit of a distinction between F1s and J1s. F1s, some options are CPT, curricular practical training, or OPT. These are benefits associated with F1 student status, and they're, you can see, for curricular practical training, ISSS is involved. For optional practical training, both ISSS and USCIS is involved. For J1s, there is something called academic training. So academic training is to a J1 what optional practical training and curricular practical training is to an F1. But these are both options that are potentials to allow you to participate in activities that are not on campus. Obviously, there are certain rules for each of those visa classifications, but both have in common that you have to be participating in an activity for which you received your degree or are receiving your degree. So you can't, go in and teach a class on auto mechanics if you're here to study biology. Even though you might be a whiz at auto mechanics, it has to be applicable to your degree. The fourth caret or third caret down, all off-campus employment performed in the U.S. must be authorized in advance. Very important. Even if it's remote, you're working from campus, or you are in an unpaid position, volunteering, quote unquote, in a position for which a U.S. worker could be employed, could be deemed as unauthorized employment. So just be very mindful. This is kind of why we're here, to answer any questions that you have. So anything that you have any questions about, please filter them through or vet them through our office, and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. And as it says, the work under CPT, OPT, and academic training all must be related to your major field of study. Anything to add, Lily?
Yeah, I think that is very useful information students should keep in mind. Now, when students trying to get a thorough evaluation from ISSS advisor, we want you to provide a job offer, or sometimes you don't have the job offer yet, but you have the job posting. Then that will list the details about that job so that we can evaluate where is the location, what is the responsibility, how you're going to get paid, and how many hours that you're committed if you get hired for that job. So if you give those information to your ISS advisor, they will be able to evaluate that against your visa permission. Then we can give you a more defined answer to say, yes, this is definitely on-campus employment, or this one, no, or this one is maybe if you provide additional information to us.
Okay, so the next step, if you have a position for which you're receiving pay, is that you're going to want to make an appointment with Onboard at Penn. You are going to do what's called a Form I-9. This is an employment authorization form that everyone has to complete prior to working. Even U.S. citizens, green card holders have to fill out this form to demonstrate that they have the legal ability to be employed in the U.S. So it's really the student, as it says, the student's responsibility to make sure that the hiring department is informed of any changes to your immigration status. Be mindful of the fact that F1 students, once your I-20 ends, so does your employment authorization based for on-campus employment. Likewise, J1 students, again, very different, where they have to apply prior to undertaking any employment authorization. And there's going to be a form that is completed by yourself, by the hiring department, and then signed off by ISSS. The end date listed on that form, on the J1 on-campus employment form, is when your employment is discontinued for that particular activity. You might have a DS 2019 that goes until 2027, but that employment authorization form can only be issued in 1-year increments. So be mindful of that. If you are being employed and receiving a paycheck and you need to have a social security number, we just want you to be mindful of the fact that sometimes Onboard at Penn or Workday might assign you a temporary number until you get a social security number. But a social security number, if you're receiving a paycheck from Penn, is something that you are going to need to have and apply for.
Mm-hmm. It is very important that Penn doesn't have the authority to give you the SSN. The Social Security number has to be issued by Social Security Administration, and that is a government agency. So if you don't have your SSN card, you don't have a SSN number, even though sometimes maybe in the Penn system, you will see a temporary number, but be sure not to use it because it's going to mess up your tax return and many other things. So now another case study. A student works at Penn Library during their senior year. Their supervisor asked if the students can continue working for the summer to help them with a special project. The student is planning to graduate in May, and their I-20 will expire on May 20th, 2024. Can the students keep working during the summer?
I would say no to that, Lily, because we had just mentioned that once your I-20 ends, so too does your employment authorization for on-campus employment. So let's see what the answer is.
Yep. So exactly, Irene has clearly explained for an on-campus work authorization, it is associated with your I-20 or DS 2019 end date. When that program end date has reached, then the on-campus employment work authorization has to end on that program end date as well. If you would like to continue to work on some on-campus job, then you will need to transition into some other format, such as, optional practical training for F1 students or academic training for J1 student. But you have to have OPT or AT been approved. It cannot be I'm applying. When you are still applying, you are in pending status, you don't have work authorization. You have to wait.
Okay, so now we're at the Social Security number part. Again, as Lily had mentioned, our office in Penn does not issue a Social Security card or a number. So you will have to use the letter that our office can provide to you to apply for a Social Security number. So as the first caret says, you're eligible to apply for a Social Security number if you have future or current employment. Okay, so when you go to the Social Security office, and the address is at the bottom of the screen, you're going to need to bring with you the support letter that our office can provide to you. And in your iPen account, there is an e-form where you can request that letter from us. And when we say a wet signature, that means it's an actual old-fashioned signature signed off from someone in our office. Once we have issued you that letter, you'll receive an email letting you know you can schedule a time to pick up that letter. You also want to bring with you to the Social Security office, in addition to that letter, the employment letter that you have from the hiring department at Penn, as well as your other documents immigration documents to reflect what your current status is. And that includes your I-20, DS 2019 if you are a student or a J1 student, your F1 or J1 visa, a copy of your passport, and your I-94 card. Make sure you print all of these off. Don't just bring them with you, but you're going to want to have copies along with the Social Security form when you go to the Social Security office. Okay, and we have some more. This is on our website. Just make sure you can do a Google search on Social Security number SSN, and just all this information will be on the website to assist you. You can see where it's circled. Also, we have like a one-sheet quick guide that you can print off or look at that will walk you through the steps that you have to take.
Now, I don't know if any of you who is in the audience, a new student. Often our office have been asked, say, I'm a new student here. I don't have Social Security number. Can I open a bank account? Can I find off-campus housing? Can I get driver's license? Or even the PICO, who is the energy company to provide, electricity and gasoline services. So if you don't have Social Security number, but you do have valid passport, F1 status, you have your I-20 or DS 2019, those immigration documents, then you can still do all those things. Sometimes they will require additional document to justify why you don't have SSN. So for instance, for PA driver's license or state ID, typically they're going to ask you to show a letter that you're not qualified to get SSN. And that is the reason that you don't have that number. They will take that letter and be able to move on to the next steps. So if you don't have SSN, don't worry. You should, carry your immigration document. Will still be able to receive services in those areas.
Okay. And just as we close in on the end of our presentation, just remember per university policy, if this is your first on-campus job, you've just arrived, you have to make sure you have an active SEVIS status, which I'm guessing all of you have at this point. SEVIS is the Student Exchange Visitor Information System. It's the government database that we ISSS activates once you've done your arrival information through IPEN. So we just have to make sure you actually are listed as active in the SEVIS system. And also, Social Security number, Lily had mentioned, is required for tax purposes. So if you are receiving pay from a U.S. source, you're going to have to file U.S. taxes. As it's highlighted in yellow, we are not tax experts. We do not want to even fathom a guess as to how to advise you because, again, we're not experts. We don't want to give you wrong information. But come probably late February, March, we will send to each of you an email where you can access information about filing your taxes. It's through Sprint Tax, and they provide information. It's a benefit of being an international student. We will provide that information for you. And then if there are any additional things that are required prior to you undertaking on-campus employment, just we recommend that you reach out to the hiring department to make sure that you've vetted through them anything additional that you may need to do. Anything else, Lily?
How about we move to the Q&A section? And I think one thing that we want to emphasize with everyone is it is possible that you have several options. Could you do on-campus employment, or you really need to apply for work authorization? Then turn to your ISS assigned advisor. Double check with ISS before you make any move. If you do work without authorization, then the consequence is very severe. You may lose your immigration status, and then that will jeopardize your academic study, or even worse, your future career. So
I was just going to add to that again, make sure if you're a J1, you have to take a little bit more preemptive action and apply for on-campus employment first through ISSS before undertaking any on-campus employment. So just a reminder for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Irene, I saw there are a couple of questions posted in the Q&A section. How about you go ahead to read out loud and I will answer them.
Okay. I am a first-year PhD student. I am not a TA or RA yet. Do I need to wait till second year or by the time I get a TA assignment to request my SSN?
That's an excellent question. So for PhD students, you may receive funding in different formats. If your funding does not require you to provide any services, it's more like a fellowship format Penn just gave to you, then it doesn't qualify as employment. If that is the case, then you're going to wait until you have some real employment, such as TA or RA, then you will fill out the on-campus employment form. When you do that form, your department going to sign and ISS going to sign so that you can use the supporting document to request for SSN number.
Okay, second question. Can you apply for a Social Security number without being employed as an F1 or J1 student? For example, if you submit the online application, can you go to the SSA with your passport, I-20, etc.?
So when you do online application, one of the required documents is to show you have employment, because SSN number itself, right now, US government have refined its definition that it's used only for employment purpose for tax-related reasons. So if you don't have employment, then you don't have a valid reason for SSN request. Therefore, first, you're going to have trouble to complete the online application form because you're not able to provide all required document. Also, the SSN is not going to issue you the Social Security number if you cannot demonstrate you have employment. Just being in US with F1 or J1 valid status, it does not require you to have SSN. You can still be a student, but you just won't have the SSN number until you have the employment opportunity.
Okay. My I-20 will expire in August 2025. If I graduate in August, December 2024 and want to work after that, what kind of permission should I apply for, CPT or OPT?
That's another excellent question. It seems you have paid attention to our presentation that we have been emphasizing you need to know your program end date on your I-20. In this particular scenario, it seems you may graduate earlier. If you're going to graduate earlier, although your I-20 have the future end date, but the fact that you're going to be no longer be a full-time student, it's going to take away your on-campus employment work eligibility away. Instead, you're going to apply for post-graduation work permit, which is for F1 students, it's going to be optional practical training. If you're J1, you're going to apply for academic training, but you need to apply those work permits in order for you to work after December 2024, although your I-20 itself maybe currently show until 2025, because our office is going to receive data feed from the academic system. And when we know you're going to graduate in December, in the CVIS system, the I-20 end date going to be updated. So the I-20 that you have in your hands needs to receive timely update. After December 2024, you cannot use the current I-20 to travel anymore. You will need to get an updated I-20 from ISS. At that time, if you are on optional practical training, then you may travel under that status. But the existing I-20 itself will not have its value anymore.
Okay. This is a good question. What is the difference between a student worker and work study?
So often, if you look for the job posting on the Workday, it's going to label them as student worker or work study. Student worker itself basically just define the work itself is qualified for students to apply. Work study is associated with financial aid. So typically, if you receive a letter from financial aid and they give you that phrase to say you're going to receive college work study fund, then the college work study related position, you are eligible to apply. For those students who is not eligible for receiving the financial aid to give the college work study fund, then you will not be able to be hired into that type of position, but you can still do student worker, that type of job.
Okay. If I wanted to get a Social Security number, but don't want to begin work immediately, could I still get it, seeing that an on-campus employment letter is one of the required documents?
Well, the relationship we have explained between employment and SSN is having an employment opportunity or work engagement. That is the prerequisite for you to get SSN. Now, it does not require to work intensively or work continuously once you have the employment activity. So for instance, if you truly have a short-term temporary job, work in an office for like 5 hours per week for like 1 week or 2 weeks, and after that you want to take a break, you don't want to work anymore, that's perfectly legit for you to use that short-term work opportunity to apply for SSN. However, if you are thinking that I'm not going to do any job at all for the first year or for the first 2 years, and I want to have SSN, then that is not possible, because you cannot justify you have an employment, which has to be the prerequisite for SSA office to give you the SSN number.
And just, I've been asked also, if you have a position, you get your social security number and then you don't work for a bit, do you have to apply for another social security number? And the answer to that is no. Once you have a social security number, it's with you for life. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we have one other question. Can career services offer me a position? I'm a freshman and I have my resume ready.
Yeah. So career services, they actually are not just focusing on on-campus employment. Their job, most of the job is with outside entities, can be private sector, nonprofit. For most Penn-related job, you're probably going to have a better off to look within work at Penn. And I think there is a student employment website that you can browse and trying to find out student related positions. The career services, what they could do is to help you, like for instance, prepare for your interview, to polish your resume so that it can make you stand out when you apply job as an applicant. But I don't believe career services will automatically give anyone any job. So they are more kind of serving as a service unit to connect you with hiring department, hiring company, and the relationship between you and the company or department, it's going to be separate from career services. And
Okay.
And I also want to emphasize for what Irene have explained, to say some students, especially if you're a PhD student or master student, that you may have been into US, a year ago, 2 years ago, sometimes we have seen 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that you were in US and you had SSN during that past experience already. That number itself going to be stay with you. Sometimes students will tell us, I remember the number, but I don't have the card anymore. Is the number still valid? Yes, the number still is valid. If you are able to kind of remember the number, you can go to SSA office and request SSN card replacement. But the number itself will be for your whole life in US. It won't change once it is issued.
Okay, we don't have any more questions coming in the Q&A. See if we have any in the chat.
Well, if we're going to stay on for a couple of more minutes, and also on the screen, you can see a QR code. If you can quickly scan that short questionnaire, we promise it's going to take less than a minute. Really, it's very simple. But if you could do the survey, so that give us some feedback. We always look for ways to improve our workshop and make sure our workshop is serving our clients' need. So if you are able to do this, we will greatly appreciate that. Thank you again for everyone who joined us this morning. Hope today's information is helpful to you. And if you have any additional question, feel free to reach out to your ISS assigned advisor. We will be here, help you when you have questions.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.